Hello buddy, it's Wyron here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Cold Match gameplay. This time around we are on Duskwatch Plateau playing as the forces of fair Brettonia, or rather the forces of Lyonesse against the forces of the Dawi. And in this matchup, what I really wanted to try was see if I can make a build centered around Repanse de Lyonesse work. Because many of her perks, when I looked at them, I felt would be really strong against the Dwarfs. She does have, of course, her AoE buff with the Fleur de Lis banner grants +9 melee defense and melee attack. This makes a unit with normally pretty trash stats, such as Foot Squires, fight a lot better if she's in the fight alongside them. She also does have Halo of Maidenly Wrath. Now, this is does a little bit of damage. It is a damage knockback sort of ability, but that doesn't really matter against dwarves. That's not what you bring for. But you do get blinded. -24 melee defense, -24 melee attack. That is huge. That means your Foot Squires, which once again do not have very good stats, could potentially hit a lot more efficiently. Granted, it only lasts 10 seconds, but still, 10 seconds is 10 seconds. I actually did decide to bring the Sword of Lyonesse here because I figured she would be one of my key damage dealers, and getting an extra 50% damage as well as 40 more melee attack is pretty bonkers. Alongside her, I actually did bring Felix Jaeger, because Felix is actually, in my opinion, a good choice in this matchup. He does get a bonus for his infantry, a hefty +20, so stacked on top of his baseline of 20 melee attack, pretty solid. 55 melee defense, more than good enough to survive most dwarven scum. 70 armor, also not terrible. Most importantly, though, he does have this Blood Oath. So when he's standing alongside Repanse, he is going to be healing her, and this means that I can skip out on a Lore of Lifecaster and get a different lore, and in this case it is going to be a Lore of Beasts. If I can find her, she is hiding over here on the flank. Besides that, of course, we actually did bring the Helping Hand. I was a little worried that my opponent would try to snipe me out with a cannon or something, so I figured, this could be helpful. Extra 40 melee attack also never hurt anybody, so you never know. Could have come in useful. We also do have Karagul, which adds an even heftier bonus for his infantry and even more melee attack. Basically makes Felix unable to miss against most infantry targets. Even a unit like Ironbreakers will start to feel the hurt when he's buffed up like that. Now, besides that, as mentioned, we do have a Lore of Beasts Damsel. She's out here on the flank. I did bring Amber Spear because that's great for deleting high-end dwarven troops with a flank shot. And of course, we do have the transformation of Kadon because getting Manticore summons is always nifty. We also do have Wild Heart, Scroll of Shielding, as well as Power Stone. That said, in this match, and I don't know why it was, the transformation of Kadon actually bugged out on me. It was blocked out and said that my army is full. Now, I do believe my army is a full 20 stack here, but that should not be the case. It should not simply be blocked out because my army is full, because normally full is the 40 models, and even if it's full at 20, it should have come on later, but it actually did not until my damsel routed much later into the game. Now, the front line is composed of full 5 units of Foot Squires. These guys, not the most impressive melee troops, but they're your only great weapon infantry. So I figured let's try and make them work. Hopefully, with Repanse's buffs, they can do the job. Behind them, we do have 4 units of Peasant Bowmen, providing fire support. 2 of those do have pox arrows, so hopefully that can help a little bit. 5 units of Peasants, stretching out this line, making it a lot wider, and hopefully giving us some disruption. The fact that dwarves don't have Fear or Terror does mean that Peasants can hold up a lot longer and just stall a lot longer. We also do have Defenders of the Fleur de Lis and 2 units of Questing Knights performing flank duties. Not my favorite choice in this matchup, to be honest. I prefer Flying Cav. One of the big threats, of course, is artillery camping in a box, which is exactly what my opponent is doing here. And normal Cav tends to suffer very, very badly from Giant Slayers. And go figure, my opponent brought 2 of them here. So it's going to be an interesting engagement. Now, for my opponent's build, he has decided to bring a Belagar Ironhammer, stripped down on foot, nothing fancy. He's definitely he's a solid, cheap, budget survival lord. Personally, I'm not a big fan. I think a Rune Lord is better just for the snare, but, we'll see how he performs. He is backing up a Dawi gun box, and this is definitely going to be tough for me to crack. I didn't bring flyers. The transformation of Kadon, as mentioned, is bugged, and so I can't just drop a Manticore in there. And my opponent has cannons, the Goblobber, and 2, not 1, but 2 of the newly cheapened flame cannons. And these guys are going to melt my peasant hordes. And besides that, we do have a bunch of Longbeards in the front line. These guys were made more expensive. Fortunately, they definitely deserved the nerf, in my opinion, but they are still a very, very efficient infantry. They will still hold their own very nicely. A bunch of Dwarf Warriors with great weapons out on the flanks. These guys, not the greatest troop. Definitely not the biggest fan of them personally, but we will see how they perform. We do have more of them covering the back, as well as some vanilla Dwarf Warriors, most likely to costs. Finally, there are 2 units of Giant Slayers in the back, which can potentially absolutely devastate my cavalry, and a single unit of Gyrocopter Brimstones flying above the battlefield. And these guys have gotten several buffs in the last 2 patches, and are a much more potent force, and I definitely have to watch out for what they could do to my poor cavalrymen. Fortunately, though, my opponent does not seem interested in that. He is sort of flying over, looking to get some pot shots at my infantry. Takes a volley from the archers, who don't really do anything. Drops some bombs. Not really doing much either way. My arrows are whiffing, and yeah, the bombs didn't do a huge amount there either. So, you take not much, don't do much in return. It is what it is. That said, my infantry is suffering pretty heavily. These guys are already down to 68 models and bleeding more. These foot squires down to, say, you know, the bombs did something. 78 and 77 there, so definitely took a hefty beating. Repanse, though, just trucking along all on her own. She will lead the Brettonian forces to victory, even if it kills her. And I don't even know what she's doing there. Takes a full flame cannon burst to the face, but she just gets up like an absolute champ and is going to keep pushing along. And, you know, once she gets in there with Felix, a lot of that lost HP will be made up. She will be able to heal it. Now, the Flame Cannon is deleting the peasant mobs, and the peasant mob won't be able to sort of suffer through firepower of that magnitude. The -8 burning debuff, plus the under-artillery attack, plus the massive damage being done is just chunking them and forcing them to rout. And these foot squires are not doing much better. They're just getting deleted. The flame cannons are brutal. And this is one of the big reasons to bring a flyer or a transformation of Kadon, which unfortunately is being blocked right now. Now, as you can see here, I do lance formation and plow through the dwarf warriors, trying to get in on these flame cannons and shut them down with the defenders fluidly. My opponent is very effective with his giant slayers and shifts to counter. You know, that kind of sucks. These questing knights here do extricate themselves without much loss. These questing knights on this end, though, plow through, but are now trapped in the box with the giant slayers, and they are more than likely screwed. They are not going to be very long for this earth. In the meantime, my infantry line is collapsing. The peasant bowmen are getting shredded by ranged fire. These guys are wavering and barely there. These foot squires completely routed. And really at this point, it's just 3 units of foot squires, one of them incredibly mauled, trying to get in on this Dawi box, this Dawi filth. But in comes Felix as well as a Repanse, and they are kicking some serious rear. These longbeards are getting diced up very, very efficiently. And in come the arrows now. So the arrows not the most amazing thing ever, but they're going to start whittling down these flame cannons as well as these cannons, even though a lot of them are routing. My opponent not sort of juggling his shooting quickly enough, so because of that, he is taking that sustained fire. And we did manage to escape with this unit of questing knights, and in the meantime, we are going to start throwing peasants into the grinder. My opponent does set his brimstone guns to pursue the defenders of the fleur-de-lis, and that sucks for them. I'm not going to be able to get them back. So, essentially, 2 units of cav have already been lost. The questing knights deleted, and of course, they can't heal, so they're screwed. But you know what? Repanse as well as Felix are kicking Belegar's rear. We do pop Karagul, getting that massive buff to stats. 60 melee defense is not going to save him, not against the Sword of Leoness as well as Karagul, and he is getting his butt kicked, and so he's not going to last much longer. Flame Cannon, though, does work. It does manage to melt some of his own great dwarf warriors with their weapons, but probably doing more to my troops than his own. Fortunately, I do manage to get behind this berm a little bit, and that is sheltering my boys a tiny amount from those searing flames, though, as you can see, not very much there. The Lord Beast's caster now, kind of useless because I was counting on that summon, that transformation of Kadon, and I can't make it happen. So all I've got is Amber Spear, but my opponent doesn't have any pretty lines. He didn't bring shooting, or foot infantry shooting. So, yeah, I don't have the greatest tools here. Basically, my magic is kind of worthless. I was kind of regretting not bringing a cheap support spell. Perhaps a Pan's Belt, or maybe a Wissen's Wild Form. In the meantime, though, Belegar is getting his rear kicked still by the Felix as well as the great damsel here, Repanse, of course, just wrecking him. Foot Squire sticking in the fight, crushing the Dwarf Warriors and the Longbeards, sort of grinding them down over time. And of course, with the benefits from Repanse, you can see their stats up to 34 and 29, which is huge. That is a massive improvement. Those are almost great sword. Actually, those are basically our great sword stats. So compared to their normal stats, this is a massive improvement. Makes them much, much more capable. The peasants here do get deleted by the flame cannon, but you know they're peasants. They're here to die. And more foot squires are now pouring into the breach, sort of coming in as reinforcements. Of course, they're not going to win at this crippled state, but the point is they're stalling. The point is that they're doing damage. Meantime, over here, Giant Slayers do pull back, while the Questing Knights are simply doing cleanup. Right now, I don't want to risk them. I want this unit of Questing Knights to stick around to the bitter end, if at all possible. And yeah, I still can't summon the Manticore. So the artillery is free to do as whatever it pleases. This was really taking me off, and at this stage of the game, I was practically convinced I was going to lose. Now, a little bit of Miss Micro here. I ordered her to use this Amber Spear, and that being the weird spell it is, she decides to micro right into the Giant Slayers, while I wasn't paying attention, while I was fixated over here. So Yeah, she starts getting chopped to death. I do try to extricate her, but her leadership tanks very quickly. The damsel is not able to stick around, and she's going to start routing. Bellegar over here does actually break. He's forced off from the fight, so that stout Dwarven leadership is not enough to keep him in the fray. And at this point, it's basically a hero ball. The only troops I really have left are these courageous foot squires who have been fighting tooth and nail alongside Repanse as well as Felix. And we are slowly but surely grinding these dwarven scumbags down. The balance of power is actually slightly in my favor. I believe that is because my lords are in such good shape. Because really nothing else in my army is in good shape. And fortunately, being on foot for both of these guys, the Giant Slayers are not going to get those monstrous benefits against them. Now, the questing guys here are going to sally out of the woods. We do have the damsel in here as well. I've been trying to use Amber Spear at least. Finally, due to the fact that she routed, it seemed to have reset the army counter or something, and I'm able to get the transformation of Kadon. Finally, 5.5 minutes into the game, a spell that I should have had about a minute in. So I was definitely not thrilled that this was how long it took, but you know what? Better late than never. In the meantime, the archery fire is raining down. I was trying to melt the Giant Slayers. Probably a bit of a mistake. I probably should have knocked out that flame cannon sooner. But we were going to send the Manticore in there. Hopefully it can settle our issue here once and for all. It dives in on that flame cannon, and it's going to start doing some damage. Not going to last very long with the Giant Slayers on its tail, but, you know, we try. In the meantime, we do try to get an Amber Spear here. Damsel is trying to fire. It's not going to be a nice meaty one. It does picks up 3 kills, but nothing impressive. At this point, I just didn't have much to do. I kind of had a second Manticore summon and Amber Spear, so you do what you can. Feral Manticore is going to start chopping into these guys. Keep in mind, with no armor, they actually are pretty susceptible to the Manticore, even though they will melt it very quickly. So it's up to 12 kills now. Damsel does dive in here to chase off the Flame Cannon and disrupt the cannon, which is now wrecking my poor questing knights. They're down to 34 models. And that's basically only been from that, like, one volley of that cannon. So that's definitely pretty nasty. The Manticore here getting torn to shreds. Manages to pick off about a dozen more of those Slayers, but, you know, every little bit counts. Every little bit counts. Here in the pits, the last of the Giant Slayers are getting massacred. Felix as well as Repanse are in very good shape. We can actually see, here they are. We do actually pop the explosion there, knocking back the stunty swine and making them fall in their rear. Repanse are standing tall here with Felix right alongside her. So 2 legendary heroes slugging it out, caked in dwarf blood. And there are some foot squires still lingering around. And once again, those enhanced stats coming in are really helping them stick around. You look at that with Scroll of Shielding. I actually put Scroll of Shielding on these guys because Repanse and Felix don't need it. But look at how many kills these guys have racked up. He's up to 51. She's up to 80. That's in just a few seconds. And now Balance of Power is going to swing decisively in my favor. And it is going to be a Pyrrhic victory for Brettonia. After an incredibly crappy start. We just lost so many troops to those flame cannons, to that Goblobber. And then the cavalry just decimated on the charge, trying to bust through that dwarven line to just get at that artillery and save our troops. So after what was really just an unimpressive, uninspiring opening, we managed to bounce back and kick some Dawi rear. Now, a few things. One, as far as I can tell, Transformation of Kadon is bugged. Even when I lost certain troops here, with a 20 stack, you're not able to get your summons off, and you're not able to, even when you lose troops, you don't get your summons off. So that sucked. That's almost screwed me this game. I think if I'd been able to get that Manticore off, or both of the Manticores off a lot sooner into that game, my opponent would have been in big trouble. It would have meant my archers wouldn't have gotten decimated. That in turn would have meant the archers could have started working on the Giant Slayers or key units a lot sooner, because the Flame Cannons at least would have been taken offline, and that would have probably really shifted the balance of power there, I think, in my favor a lot sooner. So I was really not happy about that. I hope that gets fixed. It is something to keep in mind. I don't know if it's because I started with a 20 stack. I don't know if it's what the reason behind that was, but as I'm 100% convinced it's a bug, because I did have less than 20 troops and was still not able to summon at later points in the battle. So be aware of that. Amber Spear didn't perform well for me here. It's a spell I'm very happy with against most Dwarven builds, but this was a Dwarven build that really didn't have good targets. Amber Spear is not the best anti-artillery spell. Giant Slayers were the only expensive unit my opponent really had here, and they're like the one Dwarven elite that's very resistant to it. So just not a great showing for the Damsel, and she was an expensive purchase. She was about 1,000 gold with her full kit here. In hindsight, probably should have gotten a Wissen's Wild Form. Would have helped the Foot Squires suffer through a little more damage. Besides that, surprisingly, peasants racked up about, I don't know, almost 3 dozen kills. They got 16 kills, so, you know, that's something. I'm surprised against dwarves. I wouldn't have even expected that. Archers did a lot of work, and it doesn't really show in the stats here, but they actually got a lot done against the flame cannons. Foot Squires also got a good amount done. They, at least the ones that actually made it into the fight and were being souped up by Repanse, because Repanse with that +9 melee attack, melee defense buff is insane. They were chopping through that Davi scum very, very effectively. And then Repanse and Felix, they were a killer combo. I really like them. Repanse herself, not necessarily the best combat lord. Like, she doesn't have the best stats, but the fact that you get AP, the fact that you've got the Sword of Leoness, you've got the standard of the Fleur de Lis, you do have that explosion that provides a blind effect, makes your Foot Squires a lot more effective. You can just stack all these things and debuff your opponent to oblivion, and then, while buffing your troops, and get some massive value that way. Similarly, Felix just keeps her in the fight, keeps her healed, and allows me to take an alternate caster. Damsel of Beasts, I think, is a good one here, but honestly, Lord of Heaven could have been solid as well. If I had brought Lord of Heaven, I could have then brought... I could have then gotten the Curse of the Midnight Wind, could have gotten the Harmonic Convergence. In this specific matchup, that would have probably done me a lot more good than the spells I brought because of the bugs as well as my opponent's build. But still, either way, this opens up some good opportunities in my opinion. Really, the one unit that didn't do much here was the Cav. The defenders got deleted. They charged in, and before I could extricate them, they got torn to shreds. The questing guys got in and got torn to shreds. And then the last unit questing guys had to sort of camp on the edges, and they did very little. They just chased fleeing units. So, not too much to be said there. Now, for my opponent's build, I think one big misplay was sending Belegar into fight. You could have easily just let Repanse and Felix fight for longer. Before committing Belegar. There was not a huge rush to commit them, and Belegar is terrible against these two. Like, Repanse and Felix. Felix can buff her with an extra 40 melee attack, on top of the Sword of Leoness, on top of her innate Fleur de Lis buff. And then I actually brought Karagul. Normally people strip down Felix to nothing just to get that heal off, but I decided to bring Karagul here, so... Belegar was not long for this world once he tried to engage these guys. He really could not stand against them, and I think that was a huge mistake on my opponent's part. I think Belegar should have stayed in his lane, hid, and waited longer. I also think my opponent should have been more focused on sniping out Repanse and Felix early on with the cannon. I think that might have helped him a little more. Besides that, the build is definitely a bit gamey and a bit gimmicky, so it's hard to sort of judge exact merit. Like I said, I think Belegar is not as good as a Rune Lord. I think a Rune Lord is a better choice. Though in this case, it wouldn't have done much good for him, I think. I guess a Rune of Negation, though, could have definitely helped. Flame Cannons did immense work. But I don't think Flame Cannons are good build against most Brettonian builds. Because most Brettonian... Well, I say most, but at least some Brettonian builds. Because there's a good chance a Brettonian player will bring Hippogriffs, possibly multiple Hippogriffs. And against that, Flame Cannons are crap. And at that point, you're really just hoping your Giant Slayers and Cannon does work. But, honestly, if your opponent commits with the Hippos, they can just break up your artillery real quick, fly out, especially if all you've got is Belegar. At least with Grumbrindle, you can do Grumbrindle has no fear and keep your troops in the fight. But without that, your opponent can just dive bomb you with Hippogriffs, quickly route your Flame Cannons and the Gobblobber, get the hell out of dodge with their Hippogriffs, and now their archers have just free reign on your army. They can delete your Giant Slayers, they can delete all your valuable troops, and you're screwed. So I really am not a fan of this build. I think like 1 or 2 artillery pieces is good just to prevent trebuchet shenanigans, and then bring shorter range shooting. This might hold up well against Peasant Archer spam, so I will give it that. But I think, and obviously it did relatively well here, but couldn't do much against the heroes, so I don't know. Giant Slayers had a field day, unfortunately, for me. But yeah, I don't know. My main critique really is just this backline. Like, it looked impressive in this match specifically because of my build, but against other Brettonian builds, I don't think it's going to shine as much. Gyrocopter is also a bit of a ballsy build because Dwarven or Brettonian flying is pretty popular in this match, even if it's only like 1 or 2 units. And gyros don't hold up too well against that. But just my 2 cents there. Well played, the Silver Bagel. Do hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you found it entertaining and fun to see some Repanse and Felix gameplay. Definitely, I like this combo. Not sure I'd necessarily run this exact same build for the rest of it, but definitely want to be wary of those bugs with the Damsel of Beasts. Besides that, I guess it's okay. A little susceptible to gyros, but I think they're a rare pick in this match. So, hope you guys enjoyed. Leave your comments, critiques, and questions down below, and I'll see you all in the next one. Wyvern out.